So here's the thing. My husband's sister, Lisa, is quite the character. She's one of those corporate warriors who just loves to brag about her work ethic. Honestly, she prides herself on never taking time off sick. Can you believe it? It's like she wears it as a badge of honor, always making it a point to share this unique achievement with anyone within earshot. The kind of person who would tell you a million times about how she's always the first to arrive at work and the last to leave, believing it's the ultimate testament of her commitment to her job. What really gets under my skin, though, is how she looks down on people who don't share her relentless dedication to working without a pause. Those of us who see work as a means to an end, something we do so we can enjoy life outside of it, she sees as lazy or lacking ambition. She seems to think life has to revolve entirely around a job to have any value, and quite frankly, that just doesn't make sense to me. The world is full of wonders, and spending every waking moment working seems like a missed opportunity to explore them. Naturally, because of this mindset of hers, she isn't exactly the most beloved person in her office or, to be honest, in our extended family. But she's someone I usually only see at these family dinners once a month at my in-laws' house, which I've managed to tolerate for the time being. Typically, I just brace myself for the inevitable conversation about her grueling work schedule and how nobody else could possibly understand her struggle and sacrifice. To be fair, trying to keep the peace and hearing her out while keeping my responses limited to nods and vague agreements is usually my strategy. But it's definitely not a part of my month that I look forward to. I knew I could keep my cool for the limited time I had to endure her company at these dinners. This particular dinner, though, things were a little different. My in-laws were having some renovation work done at their place, so instead, we were all set to gather at Lisa's home. And there, in the midst of everything, surrounded by Lisa's overbearing personality and constant work storytelling, I reminded myself to be civil, to engage in some small talk, and just get through another evening. I thought, how bad could it really be? Just a few hours, and I'd be out, free from the overwhelming narrative of how life ought to be lived according to Lisa. As I stepped into Lisa's place, I reminded myself that it was just another family dinner that I needed to get through. Lisa's home was exactly how I imagined, almost sterile with awards and certificates plastered everywhere, a testament to her accomplishments. I chuckled to myself, thinking about how many of those stories I'd already heard, word for word, countless times. The evening started off civil enough, with us all sitting around, nibbling on the appetizers, and making predictable small talk. When we settled in with our meals, Lisa sat down opposite me and settled comfortably into her seat of attention, ready to narrate her latest saga from the corporate trenches. I thought I'd play nice and eventually asked her about her work, just as a way to break the ice. It seemed like an innocent prompt at the time. However, after listening to her glorified tales, it somehow looped back to me, a tactic I should have seen coming. "So how's work for you?" she asked, her eyebrows raised in that way that communicated this was more than just a casual query, it was a challenge. In that moment, I thought honesty was the best route, straying towards transparency rather than deflection. I shared how I had recently returned from being out sick. I told her that I was feeling much better and was glad to be back in the swing of things, trying to keep the discussion light and amicable. But rather than acknowledging my response, or perhaps offering a bit of goodwill, Lisa's eyes gleamed, and I could sense the familiar smugness sneaking into her expression. "Oh well, you know I never go off sick," she interjected, her voice dripping with bordering on gleeful superiority. It was typical Lisa, exactly the kind of vocal sneer I'd been expecting yet hoping to avoid. I watched as my words hung in the air, unnoticed and falling into the background as her narrative reigned supreme. I glanced at my husband, hoping he might divert the conversation, avert the incoming storm of work ethic philosophy. But, sitting across from Lisa at her own dining table, it seemed I was left to navigate the conversation myself, surrounded by the evidence of her unwavering self-praise. With a forced smile, I tried to downplay the conversation, aiming for a light-hearted touch. "Well," I laughed softly, "some of us don't mind prioritizing our health occasionally." I hoped my gentle pushback would change the subject, or at least encourage a bit more understanding. However, Lisa was relentless. She thrived on this kind of discourse. "Some of us value our jobs more than others," she continued, not missing a beat, her gaze challenging me even more as she spoke. I could feel the temperature at the table drop as my husband leaned forward slightly, pressing his lips together, clearly debating whether to step in or wait it out a bit longer. My father-in-law appeared slightly uncomfortable, his fork pausing midair, while my mother-in-law tried to radiate calm despite the clear brewing tension. Trying to keep the mood intact, my husband finally added his voice to the exchange, siding with my earlier sentiments. "Everyone deals with work differently," he said diplomatically, shooting me a small smile of support. "Health should always come first, right?" Lisa tilted her head, a familiar competitive gleam in her eye. "Oh, I agree," she said slowly, as though considering her next words carefully. But then, of course, it's about balance, understanding responsibilities. Her pointed remarks hung in the air like an uninvited guest as the silence around us expanded. In hindsight, I realized what Lisa craved wasn't a true conversation, but validation. Perhaps she needed everyone to admire her unwavering commitment, to see things her way. But as the seconds ticked by, it became evident her words were more than just casual remarks. They weighed heavy with judgment. The light, conversational vibe I had hoped for was now overshadowed by her condescending tone. And even as my family attempted to steer us towards safer topics, her attitude persisted, nagging at the edges of what was meant to be a simple family dinner. At some point, after several more jabs from Lisa about my apparent lack of commitment to my profession and her relentless insinuation that she was the only one in the room who truly understood the value of hard work, I could feel my patience wearing dangerously thin. Her superiority complex was palpable, and my firmly held composure was beginning to crumble under its weight. My pulse quickened as I put my fork down with a decisive clatter, my appetite fully diminished. "Listen, Lisa," I began, a mixture of frustration and determination in my tone. I was out of work because I had norovirus. My voice gathered a bit more resolve with each word. And let me tell you, if I wasn't glued to a toilet, I was practically bedridden, fighting off waves of sickness and trying my best not to spread it. Not to mention, I didn't want to risk making anyone else sick. I made direct eye contact with Lisa, my eyebrows slightly raised, willing her to grasp the severity I was conveying. The vividness of my description may have been more than she bargained for, but sometimes the unvarnished truth is what's needed to break through willful ignorance. For a moment, the room was wrapped in silence, the kind of silence that seemed to enlarge the very air around us with its weight. Lisa stared at me, her eyes widening slightly, no doubt both at the unexpected intensity of my response and the explicit nature of my revelation. Then, as if on cue, she recoiled, her face twisting into a mask of mild distaste. "You ruined dinner," she said, voice dripping with accusation. "That was disgusting." Her napkin was brought up to her lips, though whether it was to catch a gasp or to shield herself from my words, I couldn't be entirely sure. My husband and I exchanged a look that spoke volumes of shared exasperation and an unspoken agreement that it was time to make our exit. We didn't need to endure any further chastening from my sister-in-law, who apparently valued her pride in work over the empathy for those around her confronting real-life challenges. We left shortly after, the night having taken a turn for the unnecessarily dramatic, and as our departure echoed quietly behind us, I felt a mix of relief and lingering frustration trailing in our wake. The ride home was subdued, my husband's hand on mine, a silent gesture of support that didn't require words. The events of the night spun around my mind, a frustrating whirlpool of emotions that threatened to pull me under once again. Did I really ruin dinner? Was being honest wrong? Should I have just bitten my tongue and let Lisa believe whatever she wanted? These thoughts lingered as we neared our home. The phone rang as we walked in, a familiar number flashing on the screen. My mother-in-law. "Sweetheart," she began, her tone gentle but firm. "We know how Lisa can be, but perhaps next time, a bit more tact, some more class, maybe?" Her voice was a balancing act, attempting to pacify on one end while softly implying I had overstepped. "Tact? More class?" I repeated with disbelief. How do you respond when honesty is interpreted as a lack of it? My mind wandered back to Lisa's indifference and how she listened with deaf ears. But deep down, amidst the tangled knot of feelings, I knew one thing. I shouldn't have to feel ashamed for missing work due to genuine illness, nor should I allow someone else's misplaced judgment to invalidate my experiences. My father-in-law, though silent in conflict, understood, and my husband stood by me unequivocally. These were the anchors I clung to amidst the brief chaos. Holding to the support I could count on gave a semblance of calm, knowing that above all, truthfulness and self-respect shaped my decisions, whether others deemed them classy or not. And as the door clicked shut behind us, I knew we'd navigate this family drama as we had many others, grounded by honesty and supported by those who genuinely understood.